There are two sides to every story. The National Broadcasting Company presents the vivid drama of life itself. Broadcasting's original program of mediation, The Court of Human Relations. And now, the man who has familiarized millions of people with the idea of mediation helped to make it a creative force in American life. A.L. Alexander.
The baseball fan is a peculiarly American phenomenon. And while it is generally known that the influence of the national pastime on family life is considerable, here is an issue for mediation suggesting that the raucous call of the umpire's play ball can or may exercise an even greater influence on male habits of life than the mating call. Now, this issue as to what is reasonable in this case is submitted for hearing and settlement to an impartial board, with the parties to disagreement agreeing to abide by the decision. In this case, we can't guarantee it. Our board consists of three key personalities in American life. Fannie Hurst is one of the few persons I know who is in the very midst of an active and highly successful career, and at the same time is in a position to enjoy being one of our very colorful legends. Dr. Ralph Emerson Davis is a veteran mediator. Skilled and self-reliant judgment is his particular forte. And Dr. Robert J. McCracken is the renowned pastor of New York's famed Riverside Church. Now, I think it's only fair to state, Miss Hurst and gentlemen, that the only mediator with a baseball background here is Dr. Davis. Fannie Hurst admittedly knows very little about baseball, and Dr. McCracken, native of Scotland, knows a great deal more, I think, about their national spectator sport, soccer. But since the essential issue is not how much baseball this respondent party knows, but the extent to which his interest is reasonable, everything considered, and for such purpose, this board is, I believe, ideal, because it is completely unprejudiced, and that is the principle behind mediation. Now, here is the complainant.
Mr. Alexander, do you think that anyone should allow a hobby to influence his whole life, his entire existence, and his temperament? And should his disposition be dependent upon a baseball? I'm a girl 19 years old, and 3 years ago I met this fellow, and he seemed to have had everything in looks and personality that a girl would want. He came to my home, my folks liked him very much, and later on we became engaged. Recently our engagement was broken, and the reason I've come here is to have the board mediate whether I'm wrong, and if I am wrong, I'd like them to tell me so. Just because a person is a fan, does that mean that his entire life should be ruined by it, and should a person's entire life be influenced by baseball?
Well, now, we'd like to ask you, just so we understand exactly what we're mediating, do we understand that there's a possibility of an adjustment is made by this young man of resuming the engagement?
Yes, there is.
But only in case there is an adjustment.
Definitely.
And we'd like to ask this question. Didn't you know when you met him and during the course of the beginning of the association that he was an enthusiastic baseball fan?
Yes, I knew he had a normal interest in the sport, but I didn't know to what extent.
And what extent was he interested in?
Well, it wasn't any longer a normal like of the sport. It was an obsession with him.
Well, suppose you give us an example.
Well, for example, on our dates, it would invariably turn into a session of talking about baseball players, and whenever he came to my house during the baseball season, we would watch the games, and even if the games were called on account of rain, he would just sit in front of the television set until the games started again, and he'd just sit watching the raindrops fall on the field.
Despite the fact that you wanted him to do other things?
Yes.
Well, you say he came to your home for dates, and I assume you had various programs arranged of various people. Give us an example of what went on during one of these dates, even when he was alone with you.
Well, we would start a conversation, and we'd start talking about baseball. It seemed it always got around to baseball. And we had sort of a game of his giving me the nickname of a famous player, and I'd have to fill in the last name, and I'd have to spell the names of the players. And when we went to the movies, he would be very nervous and fidgety, and he'd always walk out, giving me an excuse he had to leave for a few minutes, and I knew that he had gone to find out the results of a game.
Well, what finally happened?
Well, what finally happened is that one weekend, one of his friends, who was a player on a baseball team, came into town, and he asked me whether I would like to go along too, and of course I just about had my fill of baseball because this has been going on for quite a while, and I said no. And I said I don't want to go, and I feel that since we had this date that you should keep it with me and not go. And he said, well, this is the only time he'll be in, and I want to see him. Well, he broke the date, and I just told him right then and there, well, if baseball is more important to you than me, then this is it.
Well, sir, we understand that you've been engaged to this young lady for several years.
That's right.
And can you tell us, she's a very attractive girl, I think there's no question about that. What about this question of your loyalty to her and all that that represented, and your loyalty to baseball?
Well, I always felt that my girl would always be there, but if I missed a game, I just could never make it up, and there's no way you can make up a game if you don't see it.
Uh-huh. Now, tell us how you feel when a game is scheduled and you're going to the game or going to watch it on television. Just what is your reaction?
Well, I think only a real baseball fan knows the feeling, but I get really excited, and I just love to go out and see the games, and the atmosphere, the whole atmosphere, it just excites me, and it's something I can't explain. I just love the game, and I want to see the game so badly that it hurts.
And your heart beats more rapidly?
Certainly does.
And you just feel great.
Well, nothing else matters at the time.
Well, now, let me ask you this. Do you mind if I quiz you a little bit about baseball?
No, I don't see why you can't.
First, I want to ask you if you're in a group and they're discussing politics or religion or the weather. Are you interested in that at all?
Well, the only time I'm interested in the weather or worry about the weather is when there's a game scheduled the next day. I want to know if the game's going to be played, because I look forward to watching them on television or going to them. And
weather's very important.
It's a dull day.
Just how do you make a living?
I'm a music director.
Yeah. Well, what is your idea of the most rewarding experience in life, the thing that gives you the greatest relaxation?
Well, I love to just stretch out on a couch or in a big chair and watch a nice ball game on television and have a nice cool drink and a sandwich.
That's your idea of comfort?
That's comfort to me.
Can you tell us and this board why baseball is the most dominant aspect of your life?
Well, it's in my blood. I just love it, and all my life I've always loved the game, and I've been watching games ever since I was a little boy, and it's just nothing's ever fazed me as much as baseball. It's the only thing that I took an interest in on my own and just went out and looked into the game.
Well, why weren't you as much interested in arithmetic?
It seemed dull to me. It didn't have the excitement or the glamour that baseball had to me, and it's just thrilling, the game.
Nobody forced you to take up baseball?
Oh, no.
Well, now, what have you tried to tell him?
Well, I've tried to tell him that it's nice to have a normal interest in a sport, and of course it fills up any leisure time that you may have after work, and of course it fills up any other time that you may have on weekends. But once it takes the whole of your whole life, it becomes not only destructive to oneself mentally and socially, it just ruins your whole life. I mean, of course, socially it can be understood and can be held to heart a little bit more than mentally, because mentally it affects your whole general scope of life, and you become a very dull person and one-sided. And of course, in his case, if the game goes well, he's very happy, gloriously happy, and nothing that I say or said when we were engaged could bother him. But if they lost, then there was just no talking to him. He became very melancholy, and you just couldn't speak to him at all. And I mean, to exemplify that, it's like the character of Macbeth. I mean, he was a manic depressive, and I think that's a terrible thing. I mean, because if he put as much interest into his work and other things in life, current events, things that are important in the world, I think he'd be much better off for it. And he'd also be a greater success in business.
Well, now, before we hand this over to the mediators, sometimes I'm asked, how do I know that the people are telling the truth and so forth? And I think it's only fair that I ask you a few questions about baseball. May I ask you any question I want?
Any question you want.
Well, now, do you feel that the outfield dimensions in the big leagues, that all the outfields should be of the same dimension? I understand that because of real estate situations and so forth, that while the infield is exact as far as dimensions are concerned, the difference between the bases and from the pitcher's box to the catcher's box and so forth are identical, and within a quarter of an inch, that the outfields vary tremendously. Now, do you think that's good or bad?
Well, I think it's good that the outfields vary, and it makes a more interesting game for the pitcher. See, each pitcher has to work on each batter differently in each park.
Well, it makes it tougher for the pitcher.
Due to the fact that a right-hand hitter might have power and the fence is short or longer, and he has to work differently. But if all the outfields were the same dimension, it would be a very mechanical thing for each batter.
Every game would be more or less the same in the sense that the pitcher would pitch the same to each batter, so it adds variety and interest to the game.
I think it does.
Yes. How do you rate the two leagues, the National and American League? I mean, which league do you think is a better league, from the point of view of the players?
Well, I think the National League is. I think the stars in the American League would be stars in the National League, but I think the day in and day out ball player in the National League has a little more talent than the American League.
Are you in favor of a third league?
No, I am not.
Why not?
Well, personally, I don't think there's enough talent in the two leagues now to make it a strong enough league, and there isn't enough talent to go around in the two leagues now to make a third league out of
How
these
about
players.
the All-Star game? Do you understand they're going to have, or in prospect, is a second All-Star game? Are you in favor of that?
No, I am not. I think that we should accept the fact that the turnout of the game, of the first game, should rest for the whole season, and not a National League win the first game, the American League win the second game.
Well, would you like baseball to remain as it is? You want to change?
I don't think it should change a bit. I don't think anybody should try to change the game. The game is fine the way it is. People enjoy it, and I certainly do, and I just wouldn't like to see it made uninteresting, and I think it's interesting the way it is now.
What was the greatest catch you ever saw in the outfield?
The greatest catch I ever saw was 1954. It was the last game of the season, and it was down in Philadelphia, and Duke Snyder made a catch that, till this day, I still don't know how he got it.
Tell us about
off
that.
Willie Jones. Well, Willie Jones got up with a few men on base.
By the way, I want to see, excuse me, whether you've briefed this girl. Willie Jones, do you know his nickname?
Puddinhead.
Well,
I don't probably get that.
Well, I trained her. Jones hit a drive and Snyder went charging back. It was the last out of the game of the season. And Snyder just flew in the air.
You mean it would have been the last out if he caught it?
Well, he did catch it.
Well, tell us about it.
Well, he went running back and he jumped, and it seemed to me that he caught his spike on the outfield wall, which is on an angle in Philadelphia, and it's wood.
Which wall was that?
The left field wall.
Mm-hmm.
And he went right up it, and he just seemed to scale the wall and just caught it in his webbing and pulled it down, and it was a big riot and everything, and the Phillies swore that he trapped it off the wall, but he caught it.
But that was the greatest catch you
Oh,
ever.
tremendous. Real circus.
We'd like to ask you this question, then go on if we may. Do you have any idol among the players? Who's your idol?
Well, I think Robin Roberts is about the and is a man that's a leader and a real classy performer, and he's a leader of men and
Great personality.
tremendous. And he wins ball games, and he's out there, and that's my boy.
Is he a quitter?
Never quits. Really hangs in there, and win, lose, or draw, he's always out there, ready to pitch.
Well, I'd imagine that baseball was more or less a seasonal thing. I mean, isn't this just a conflict that goes on during the summertime? I mean, you wouldn't break an engagement with a fellow because he was interested in a summer diversion. Was this just the summertime?
No, 2 or 3 months didn't bother me, definitely not, but it's just that it seemed like it got worse all year round, because after the season was over, all I'd constantly be hearing from him was, gee, I wonder if so-and-so's salary will be changed, and who are they going to trade this year, and do you remember this game when so-and-so made a catch? And this went on constantly, and whenever we were with friends...
You mean when the snow was on the ground?
All year round. It never stopped.
Well, what about that? Well, why are you so interested in the wintertime?
Well, I think the winter is probably, it's the hot stove league, and I think it's, for conversation, I think it's the most interesting time of the year, because you go over last year and you talk about the new rookies and spring training and all the ifs that happened in the season, and if this batter did this, and if he would have done this, and you do all this prediction, and I think it's a good part of it's an important part of the baseball season.
You review the past season, and there's a prognosis on the coming season.
That's right.
So there's plenty to talk about.
Plenty.
There's a lot to it, isn't there?
She knows.
Yeah, I can vouch for that.
Well, what is your idea of a hobby?
Well, to me, a hobby means it's just something to fill any leisure hours that you have after
I believe
work.
I believe you said that,
Yeah.
but I mean, for a hobby, did you feel that he went to an extreme? Can you give us any particular incident where you feel that he didn't fulfill other obligations?
Well, in particular, of course, to me, the most important thing in one's life is one's schooling. And as I look back, we went to music and art together, and I can remember quite a few times where he played hooky from school to go to games, and it got so that the dean he was constantly going to the dean and giving her these wild excuses why he was never in school. And of course I tried to explain to him how important it was not to do this anymore, and gradually he got out of the habit. But I mean, this was terrible because he missed out on so much schoolwork, and if he didn't buckle down, he would never have graduated.
We'd like to ask this question, and then we certainly should hear from the mediators. If you were to marry this girl, or marry any girl, do you think that you could make a substantial adjustment as far as baseball is concerned?
Well, baseball is my first love, and a young boy falls in love with the game the way I did, wants to watch the ball games, and will always have that interest. And even though I love a girl, I still want to have that feeling that I can enjoy a ball game and not feel afraid to turn on a ball game or turn on a television and watch a game or go to a game on a Sunday. And if I ever married and we had children, I wouldn't want to be afraid to let my son enjoy the game and always have that fear that he couldn't relax and enjoy and get interested in baseball the way I did.
Yes, well, I think the position of these people is clear. Dr. Davis?
I'm wondering if this young man did have a family and didn't have 9 boys so he could have his own team, what would it do to his life? If he had come in and said that he couldn't think of anything but this very attractive and lovely girl, I wouldn't have been surprised. But since he comes in and says that he can't think of her because of his devotion to baseball, I am surprised and just a little bit concerned. Frankly, he really can't marry this girl because he's already married. He's got a wife already, namely baseball. He thinks baseball, he walks with baseball, he eats baseball, he spends the winter with baseball, he pays his money out for baseball. He's obsessed with baseball. It's his one great interest. And therefore, as I've said, he's already married. And unless he can lessen this excessive interest to reasonable proportions, baseball is a wonderful interest. And it's a very wonderful thing for any human being to have an avocation, to have a special...
But you do feel that because he's already married, he can't have another wife. Miss Hurst?
I think that this is a rather delightful dilemma, if you ask me. I can't take it quite too seriously. You're two enchanting young people. I think that your young man is rather a delightful nuisance. I think that if you handled him with skill, I must say I agree with Dr. Davis. I don't think that any lovely girl would like to sit by and hear her fiancé demote her to second place in his interests. Now, if that is fundamentally true, which I am not going to believe for the moment, then I think that she is within her rights. But I do think it would be tragic if, because of, it's a delayed adolescence, I'm going to be a little bit merciless. I think that's all it is. I think this young man will grow up. You are mature. The woman usually is mature. The average man is either childish, very childish, or he's an old man. There's no intermediate for the average man, but they're rather greater in their performances.
I don't know that the mediation board agrees with that.
Well, that's good food for argument then.
Well, Dr. McCracken?
I find unhesitatingly for the complainant. I think she has talked sound common sense. And I noticed that she used the word obsession, and it seems to me that this is exactly what we have had exhibited. And the obsession seems to me to indicate, I would call it immaturity. And immaturity means that there are rocks ahead in marriage if the engagement were resumed again. I think he has to come to terms with life. I think he has to remember that this is a world that calls for something beyond pastimes. After all, the word pastime indicates what a hobby is. It's a part-time interest, and to allow it to grow and grow and grow in interest and concern is to be, it seems to me, a malfunctioning personality. And what kind of husband is that?
Dr. McCracken, I trust you recognize that this is a phenomenon in America, just as I'm sure that there are similar situations in other countries. And would you be surprised to know, as incredible as it seems, that there have been murders over baseball? I mean, there have been violent encounters. A 50-cent bet can result in extreme violence, so that there is a tremendous interest in the game. And I trust that you understand that this young man is not a baseball enthusiast, but a fanatic. He is a true dyed-in-the-wool fan, but you feel that unless he can adjust after what you've heard, you would not recommend that an engagement be resumed and a marriage take place.
No, I would want to say that, of course, there's fanaticism about sport all the world over. There are fights on Glasgow streets on Saturday nights over soccer, and it seems to me that people are there losing all sense of perspective.
Well, to sum up, the point's been made by Miss Hurst that this is a delightful couple, and I think Miss Hurst feels that nothing should stand in the way of liberty, that to deny this young man the right to enjoy what he wants to enjoy in engagement, marriage, or anything else might be somewhat possessive and a little bit unreasonable. But the majority of the board doesn't go quite that far. The majority recognizes as appealing baseball, and it does acknowledge its tremendous magnetism. But they have the feeling that everything has its limitations, even baseball. It's a matter of degree. And if another person is involved, and he can't make an adjustment now, the chances are that this young man certainly isn't going to do it after he gets married. As we express our thanks to our mediators and bring this session of the Court of Human Relations to a close, may the hope be expressed as well that the parties to controversy will see the wisdom of compliance. Say the wise men, in everything, the golden mean, the middle course is best. All things in excess bring trouble to man. The silken string in the pearl chain of all the virtues is moderation.